Hey there, car enthusiasts and community champions. You might recognize us as Brookings Auto Mall, your trusted car dealership. And yes, we're in the business of selling cars, but today we're revving up something different. Welcome to BAM, Beyond the Lot. What's driving Brookings? Brookings, South Dakota. It's more than a spot on the map. It's a vibrant community where we're shifting gears, steering away from the ordinary and putting the spotlight on the extraordinary people fueling our town's heart. From K-12 educators sparking inspiration both inside and outside the classroom, to SDSU acting as a powerhouse for academic excellence and innovation. The synergy extends to the thrill of SDSU athletics, an unwavering commitment of nonprofits and businesses. These are the gears that keep our community in motion. Brookings may appear as just another town to the outside world, but let me tell you, under the hood, it's a well-oiled machine powered by the people. So join us and buckle up as we hit the road, sharing the stories of the incredible individuals propelling Brookings forward. This is BAM, Beyond the Lot, What's Driving Brookings. Here's your host, Brookings Auto Mall sales consultant and Brookings native, Connor Bestie.
Welcome to another episode of BAM Beyond the Lot. Today I'm joined with Tanner Castora. Tanner, thanks for being here.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. So to dive right in, why don't you tell us a little bit kind of about where you're from? A lot of people know that you've been in Brookings the last few years, but kind of where were you and what were you doing before Brookings?
So I grew up in Strongsville, Ohio. It's a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. And I went to Kent State. I actually had a stop briefly at South Carolina Upstate where I played basketball, then went to Kent State, played basketball for a year there, and then wanted to focus on broadcasting. So I got my degree in journalism, graduated in 2020, and I applied around the entire country for a job in sports broadcasting. Applied in 39 different states, 87 different jobs, and really the only place that gave me an opportunity was the CBS news station Kelloland in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And so I moved here in February of 2021, didn't know a single soul, and worked as a sports reporter and an anchor for 2 years with Kelloland. And then after my 2-year contract was up, we both went our separate ways. And I actually went and traveled the country for 5 months. And then what brought me back to South Dakota, I'm living here again full time, was really the opportunity to write a book on Coach Stig and the football program. So that's what I'm working on. That's really my main focus right now. I also do some freelance work for some newspapers. I call games for a streaming service as well. So trying to add to my resume, but right now my real focus is the book on South Dakota State football and Coach Stig. So been here for over 3 years now. I tell all my boys back home, I think it's a hidden gem here. I really enjoy it. Actually, I have one of my good buddies from Kent State flying out here next week for my birthday to celebrate with me. It'll be his first time here in South Dakota, so I'm excited to show him around. But I've really enjoyed my time here, and I've been here now, like I said, for a little over 3 years.
Awesome. So obviously you have a passion for sports. You played a couple years in college. Kind of where did that love start with sports, and was it always kind of specifically basketball? And was it that love of sports that kind of transitioned you into, hey, I still want to work in sports?
I wanted to be a broadcaster from the time I was 5 years old. And that started in the backyard, again, with the neighborhood boys. Grew up in an incredible neighborhood, Crystal Creek. It's in Strongsville, Ohio. And we played, I don't care if it was baseball, football, basketball. We legitimately played outside and did something every single day. We called it season baseball, season football. We'd have teams. We'd keep the records. We'd probably only get, 7 or 8 games in before a fight broke out, and that was it for the summer. But that's where sports started for me. And actually what I would do when I wasn't playing in the game, whether it was pick up basketball or baseball, I would stand on the side and pretend like I was calling the game. And it got to a point where when I wasn't doing it, my buddies would be like, Tanner, come on, we're playing. You got to start calling it. And so I started practicing calling games from, I'm telling you, the time I was 6, 7, 8 years old. And that's what I told myself I wanted to do. I wanted to take basketball as far as it could go. And then when basketball was done, I wanted to be a broadcaster. That's what I've wanted to do my entire life. And so I stuck to it, and it's working out okay for me so far.
Yeah, so applied for 87 jobs in the real shot. So did growing up and while you were in college, did you ever imagine you're like, boom, Sioux Falls, South Dakota is where I'm gonna move right away?
No, obviously not, not quite, but I was told I'd probably have to go somewhere kind of off the map. When you look at, they're called the Nielsen ratings, and it's from 1 to 209. And 1, it's by market size. So 1, I believe, is New York, and then 2 is LA, and so on. 209 is a small area in Michigan, I believe, Alpena, Michigan. And so I was told that I'll probably have to start somewhere from like 170 to 209 if I want to go on air off of right out of college. And so I figured it'd be somewhere smaller, but actually Sioux Falls is 109. So it's kind of right in the middle. And I actually was about to accept a job in Mississippi, in Greenville, Mississippi. That's a funny story in itself. Maybe we'll get into it. I actually crashed in a mountain when I was snowboarding, and things changed. I didn't end up going to Mississippi, and it ended up taking me to Sioux Falls. I actually had been praying to come here. When I saw the job opening, I looked up Sioux Falls and I Googled pictures and I saw downtown and it looked cool. I thought it was kind of like quaint to me, but it seemed like there were things going on. And then I saw the falls and I thought that looks like a cool place. And I've never been to South Dakota and I'm one for adventure. So I actually started praying that I end up coming here. And some things transpired and I did end up coming to South Dakota. So I didn't expect to come specifically here, but I knew I'd have to leave home, which has been really good for me because leaving home is, I mean, you hear all the time people mentioning leaving your comfort zone. I mean, I literally left everything that I knew behind and went to a whole new place. And it's tough. It was very challenging for over a year, but it's a good challenge because you have to, you just, not that you don't have a support system. There's just people you can call back home, but kind of have to figure it out on your own self. And so it was good for my development as a person to move out and come here.
And so coming from Kent State, obviously they have a kind of a storied tradition as a mid-major.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? And was that a pretty easy transition, or what was kind of your first impression of like, hey, wow, SDSU? Like I didn't really know much about them beforehand, but what was kind of that process?
Well, to give you a full-rounded answer, so out of high school, I had one Division I basketball offer, and that was to a smaller school called South Carolina Upstate. So I went and played ball there for a year. It was a very tough year for me, and I wanted to come back closer to home. And to be honest with you, that move to South Carolina prepared me for this move to South Dakota because I wasn't ready for it in Carolina, and I was much more apt to do it on my own when I moved here. But anyways, so I wanted to come back closer to home, and so I transferred to Kent State, and I walked onto the team. I had a preferred walk-on spot for me, so I was on the team for a year. And I just realized that I wasn't going to play in the NBA, and I really wanted to get a jump start in my broadcasting career. And so ESPN actually ended up hiring me, and I called the Kent State basketball games for the next 3 years. So I spent 5 years in college, 4 years at Kent. In my final 3 years, I actually broadcasted the Kent State men's basketball games, and that was on ESPN Plus. And so they play a lot of mid-major teams themselves. And as you mentioned, Kent State has a really good basketball program. I mean, they really do. Not so much football. They're getting there on the gridiron, but they're not quite there yet. But they have a really good program in basketball. And they stack up well against mid-majors across the country. I did know about South Dakota State because of, honestly, Mike Daum. I remember he played, and that team played against Ohio State in the NCAA tournament. And every kid here in Ohio grows up a Buckeye fan. I will put Kent State over Ohio State, of course, it's my alma mater, but I'm still a big Buckeye fan. And so I watched that game, and you learn that's really the cool part about the NCAA tournament is it's a way to learn about so many different schools that otherwise you probably wouldn't. So I knew about South Dakota State, and I knew about the football program, not like I do now, but I knew they were really good. But I also knew they weren't North Dakota State. So I was aware of them, but not to the degree that I am now. So coming here, I knew the basketball program, what kind of level to expect, but the football program, I really didn't. And I found out quickly how legitimate it is here. But Kent State and South Dakota State are very comparable, I would say. even the size of the school, the way that the university is set up, and the way that the basketball programs are run as well. So I knew about mid-major basketball. One thing that did surprise me was the support here. And I'm sure you can speak to that. It is something. I mean, even though the women's basketball team here, it is crazy. I'll send my buddies videos at a game and they'll go, "That's the women's game." I said, "Yes, this is a women's NIT game and it's sold out." So it's pretty cool that the support that they get at South Dakota State. I did not expect that. That did surprise me.
Yeah, that's what the sport here definitely makes it hard to leave, especially when you grow up being an SDSU fan, because it's
Real quick. Where are you? I don't know. Give me some of your background. Are you from Brookings? What's your story? Real quick?
I'm born and raised in Brookings, so I can't remember exactly what age it was. It was like age like 7 or 8. I was actually the ball boy for the men's and women's basketball team when they were Division II. So I grew up sitting on the hoop, fell in love with basketball. When I went to college, I went to Nebraska my first year, worked with the women's basketball team there, learned the tough way what out-of-state tuition was, moved to Vermilion because I went to USD because I was going to be an accounting major. And I'm sitting in accounting spring semester, and if you stood in the back of the classroom and you look down at all the students' computers, everybody's watching March Madness, not paying attention to the lecture. And I'm like, I want to coach. So then I came back to SDSU, and then 4 years I was a student manager with the women's team, and 2 years also working with the men's team. So Mike Dom's senior year, and then the women's team, we went to the Sweet 16. That was my last year.
No kidding.
So I'm as biased as they get when it comes to SDSU. Whenever I go anywhere outside of the Midwest and people are like, who are your teams? Like, who's your favorite pro team? I say SDSU because that's my pro football team. That's my pro basketball team. So yeah, I'm incredibly biased. Yeah.
Respect.
But yeah, so you kind of you knew about them. And while you're working at Kelloland, is that kind of when you started doing stories about SDSU? Kind of how did that whole process evolve?
So I got to Kelloland, and my sports director was Sean Bauer, and he had pitched an idea to management that he wanted there to be beats. There's 2 of us in the sports department, and he said, "Okay, we've got our local teams, USF and Augustana that we'll cover." But he said for the Division I teams, SDSU and USD, he said we're going to split it up. And he had gone to USD. So he said, "I'll take USD. They'll be my primary team." He said, "You take SDSU." And I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Okay, like I can do that." And so I started focusing on South Dakota State. And I mean, I just enjoyed it. And I've talked about this before. Being around the guys, whether it was the football team or the basketball team, they felt more like peers to me because some of these guys, you stayed 5-6 years. I'm only a year or 2 older than them. So it was nice to be around them. And as I mentioned, I didn't have any of my boys. Like everyone stayed back home. Shout out to the NFL boys and the Cliff boys. Didn't have them. They were all back at home. And so it kind of helped me develop some friendships with the guys on the teams. And those are the kind of people I was used to being around who were, into sports and athletic and competitive. And so I just got along with the guys really well. And I started to see what a unbelievable environment it is in Brookings. And that's real. It's hard to, if you're an outsider, you'll hear these quotes, but unless you experience it, you don't quite get it. It's why kids stay here. It's why, Mark Gronowski's not going to the Big Ten because of how special it is at South Dakota State. So I started to see that pretty quickly. And just fortunate for me, I got here at the peak of athletics. I mean, not just football, across the board, it is really something that is growing up in Brookings. And the football team had just gotten to the apex, and then they finally got over the hill. So I've got to witness all of those things. So really because of Sean Bauer, that's what got me focusing on South Dakota State. And it was easy to be passionate about it because, I can sit here and you can talk about how hard you work on this story or that story, but if a team isn't successful, then people aren't going to read it. They're not going to watch as much. You're not going to have as big of a following. So truly, South Dakota State's been so good to me because their success has helped me as well, and that's something I won't ever forget.
And kind of from your work in journalism, does that, when you get to work for, a program, a team like SDSU football, basketball, when they're having that much success and eyeballs are going to be on, all the stuff coming out, does that kind of make you work even harder on those stories and kind of delivering, an experience, the behind the scenes storytelling kind of works both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it could, but to be honest with you, like I'm not sure because all the teams here that I've covered have. I guess if you look at it this way, I'm not doing a story on you unless you've accomplished something. And that's just how it works. So most of the people that you get to be around as at least as sports journalists are people who are driven and who are accomplishing things, which is again just good for me because they talk about it all the time. You hear about it from the time you're a kid. You are who you surround yourself with. When you're around these people enough, I mean, I'm sure you can speak to this too. It does push you. You do want to achieve things too. And so, yeah, I think that plays a part in it. But I really do try and approach any story I do the same way. I try and put myself in those people's shoes. And we're called to treat each other as we'd like to be treated. That's Jesus's golden rule. And so if I'm that athlete or that person and someone's doing a story on me, I want that person to feel proud for their siblings to see, their parents, that they're maybe their kids one day. So I really do try and take that approach with everything I do. And yeah, it definitely makes it even better when the kid or the individual is succeeding at a high level as well.
So do you live in Brookings? When you first moved here, you moved to Sioux Falls, right?
Yeah.
Do you currently live in Brookings or are you still in Sioux
No,
Falls?
I'm still in Sioux Falls. I live in a house now with a couple buddies. I come up to Brookings about once a week during football season or basketball season. Sometimes it's twice a week. I actually did think about moving to Brookings. I did. I prayed on that one for a couple weeks, but I decided to stay here. I probably have more friends here, more going on in Sioux Falls. And I will say it kind of feels good to come and to go. It's almost like it just gives me something to look forward to. And I do have a nucleus of friends in Brookings as well. So I'm there often, but no, I live in Sioux Falls right now.
What has kind of been your experience and perception of, we talk about the support of SDSU. What has your personal experience have been with the community of Brookings, whether it's from reading and viewing your work or just, walking down the street and people know who you are? What's that been like?
So cool. I'd be lying to you if every single time someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, you're Tanner. I read your stuff or I love your work." Every single time it makes me feel really good. And that happens a lot when I'm in Brookings. I mean, people actually they read, they follow up, they know what's going on, and they pay attention to the work that I've done. And not just me, there's others as well that they're following, but every time. I don't care if it's at the gas station or when I've been bowling there at the game. When people come up and just want to shake my hand and give me a compliment, it's a good feeling. It really is. And I try and make sure that every person that does that to me, I let them know that. So it's been cool. I kind of sometimes you feel like, it's like, wow, like I'm really making a difference. People are really reading my stories about these other kids. So it's a good feeling. Brookings has been so good to me, and that's again part of the reason why I was so excited to come back. And I didn't apply for other jobs once my time was up at Kettleland. I was hoping that I'd get the opportunity with the book to stay around here, and it happened. So I wasn't applying around the country for other jobs, and I think I will be down the line. But right now I'm focused on this, and you hear all the athletes talk about it, and I'll say too, it's easy to come back to a place like this when there's so many good people and people who really care about you and want to see you do well too.
Awesome. Now I have a ton of questions about the book and kind of that, but kind of before we dive into that, just not necessarily ranking different pieces and work that you've done, but what are some of the, whether it's articles or videos you've produced or interviews you've done with athletes where you're like, that was a really unique experience, or that was kind of a shocking story. I didn't, kind of different things
Yeah.
that stand out to you that you reflect on from all your work with SDSU.
Well, I'd say the one that sticks out to me first was with the Yankees. I did a feature story on them about 3 years ago. Yeah, about 3 years ago. And since then, those two have become two of my best friends. And we met from the interview. I sat down with both of them. I'd never met them before. And I'm talking to them two sitting there, and it was hilarious. Like those guys are funny. They're funny dudes, and they're so interesting to talk to together and understand their dynamics. And we became really good friends through that. And so that was really the first story that I did. And I said, you know what? I want this to feel like an E60 on ESPN. I want this to feel like a mini documentary on someone's life. I'm gonna put music into it. I'll spend hours going through tunes to find which one I feel fits. And their story was really the first one I did that on. And I have two great friends from it. So that one sticks out to me. The Zach Hines story was probably the deepest one I've ever done. It was about his siblings, and he's had three siblings pass away. And actually, the reason why his parents decided to have more children, and Zach was a product of that, was because his siblings died. And so that plays a huge factor in who he is and who his family is. And he thinks about them every game. He writes something on his arm, SALT. It stands for all of his siblings' initials. And so that was pretty moving. And that's one of the most unique things of my profession. I mean, I go into someone's house just to get invited into someone's house. First of all, there's not many things like that. And then secondly, I'm talking about some of the most intimate things of that person's life, and they're crying, talking to me about it. And that one was deep. That one I will never forget meeting the Hines. They've been awesome to me too. I love them. And so that one sticks out a lot. The 605 Hogs, the football team, was really cool to get to know the offensive line and how they all work. And, the closer I get with these guys and as our friendships grow, you can call it access, but obviously there's just, I mean, if you're friends with someone, there's things you're going to keep between each other. So it's not like, I'm not going to tell everything they give to me in public, but what it does, it allows me to see the truth of what's happening. It helps me become a better journalist because I can understand the truth of the matter. And so I've got to see a lot of cool things being friends with these guys. Some of the things I've done recently, I did a story on Mark, which was really, really fun. I actually really enjoyed writing that. That was a challenge to figure out how to write that the right way. That one really sticks out to me. There's been a lot of stories over the years. I did one on Pierre Strong, which I put so much work into, and then I actually couldn't even air that one. And so even though no one got to see that one really besides me, that one sticks out to me. I'd have to go back and look. I can't give you a list right now. I could if I went through all of them, but there's been quite a lot. And one I'll say too that was really fun was the one I got to do a couple months ago on Matt Mims, Charlie Easley, and Luke Apple. Those three guys have meant so much to the South Dakota State basketball program. And to try and tell their story, three of them in one, kind of weave them all together because obviously their paths cross and intertwine. That was really fun too. And it takes a lot of time to put together. I mean, people would not believe how much time and effort it takes to make a 3-minute story, but it takes a lot of time, but I enjoy it. And it really doesn't feel like work. And so if that's the case, then I know I'm doing something right because, it's something I'm passionate about, and I'll be working on a story for 2 hours and it'll feel like 20 minutes has gone by. Next thing I know, I'm up till 2 a.m. by accident. So I like what I get to do, and it's an honor to tell some of these guys' stories.
Awesome. And so when your time was up at Kelloland, you stuck around because you mentioned that you wanted the book with the SDSU football team and Stig. Kind of how did that whole thing unfold? Because it's funny when I reached out to you to come on here, I had thought for a while, I'm like, Stig should write a book. And then it's like, you told me, yeah, I'm working on this. And I go, well, that makes sense. That was a good thought, Connor.
It
And
was a very
so
good thought.
kind of how did that whole process unfold?
So it was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Well, back a little more than that, probably close to 3 years ago. First time I met Stig, and we're talking, and I had listened to some of his interviews because I got here during the COVID football season, so you couldn't really talk to them in person. You would just hear them speak on Zoom calls, and I would always hear him mention his faith, and I'm a Christian myself, and so one of the first days I met him, it was media day the following year, so 2021, season that Mark missed and Oladokin was the quarterback. And we met on media day and we talked for a little bit. And I asked him, I said, are you a Christian? He said, yes. I said, I am too. He said, oh, very cool. And we talked a little about it. And from there, our relationship kind of started to grow. And when I would go to practice, a lot of times we would talk and it wouldn't be about football really. And kind of just started to develop a friendship. And, you know, he's a football coach and I have to cover him, but we just enjoy talking to each other. And so one day it was just him and I in his office, and he was telling me a story about the 2004 team, and I think it was from '04 to '07, those guys. And he was telling me how they're the backbone of everything that's happening right now. He's telling me a cool story about a couple of the kids. And I'm sitting there in his office, and I'm looking at him, and I'm going, wow. I go, you know, I wonder how many years he has left to coach. And he keeps telling me this story. And I looked at him and I said, could I write a book on you one day? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. And that was it. That was it. Just looked at each other and said that. And so I kept that in the back of my mind. And it was always something I really wanted to do. I have a list of things I'd like to accomplish in my life. And one of them is to write a book. And I didn't know what that book would be. But I just remember thinking, man, that would be so cool to do. But I was looking at what was in front of me, and I was a full-time sports reporter and an anchor. And to be honest with you, it was a lot for me. I mean, just that job alone was a lot to handle. I'm sure any job is. I'm not, singling out what I was doing and saying it was more than what even you have to do. But there's only two people in the sports department, and there's just a lot of weight on my shoulders. And it took so much time and effort to be good at that job. And I remember thinking, there's just no way that I could. Every story I do, I'm going to try hard. And there's just, I was like, there's no way I could write that book having this kind of job. Like it would take me 10 years to finish the book. And so I remember I asked Stig, I said, well, how many years do you think you have left? And I'll say this now because he told me at the time, he said, don't tell anyone this. I said, okay. And I didn't tell anyone. He told me he probably had 2 years left. He didn't say definitively, but he said probably. And I said, well, that's funny. I said, my contract ends, that same time. And so I was like, wow, well, my contract will end right about if this happens. Because let's see, I'm like, well, I don't know if they'll win this year with Oladokin. That'd be really something if they got the national championship. Because I'm thinking, look, he's an incredible guy in itself, but to really push the story over the top, they'll have to win the national championship, right? And so I'm thinking, well, when Mark returns in 22, man, they could really do it. And my contract will just be ending and he'll just be retiring. I'm like, wow, this could really, this might work. So I just kept praying about it. And so when my contract ended with Kello, another thing I wanted to do my entire life was I wanted to just travel the country. And so from the time I was 16 or 17, I started saving up, and I didn't know when I'd be able to do something like this, but I thought, well, this is a good window. I mean, I've already kind of established myself as a journalist with my 2 years at Kello, and I'm 20. I was 26 at the time. Well, I was 25. I'm 26 now. I was 25, and I thought, why not go do something right now? And so I literally just drove the entire country for 5 months, and I would stop in cities and states where I had friends and family, and I'd stay with them for a couple of days at a time. The idea was really to see people I never got to see. I was so busy. I'd moved away, and I have people all over the country I care about, and there's places I haven't seen all over the country. And so I did. I literally went and drove 12,000 miles. And I remember when my contract was up after the national championship, I thought, well, maybe I should talk to Stig about this book idea again. But I'm telling you, I prayed about it and I heard, no, not right now. Like it will come to fruition. Just go travel. And so I was okay. So I went and I'm traveling, and I'm probably 2 months into my travels, and coach texts me and he said, hey, he said, I've got a couple of journalists who are thinking about writing a book on me. He said, I told them I have to ask Tanner first because he was the one who asked me a couple of years ago. He said, are you still interested? And I said, well, I said, to tell you the truth, I think your story should be told. You're an inspiring person. The way that you've treated others will inspire people and help people. I think your story should be told. Whoever's asking you, if you think they should write the book, let them write the book. That's why I would like to write your book. I think your story should be told. If you think other people should, whatever the other person is, if they should do it, tell them to do it. But he said, no, he said, I told them I'd like to talk to you. And I said, okay, to answer your question, I would love to. I said, but I'm traveling right now. Can we start this process when I get back? And he said, yeah, that should work. And so I actually think there's another guy who's writing a book about his faith, but he gave me the okay to write the biography. And so I started writing this August of last year. So it's been around 8 or 9 months now. So honestly, it really stemmed from one conversation years ago in his office when we looked at each other in the eye and said, yeah, we'd like to do this idea. And now I'm doing it.
That's really cool. Kind of how far along are you? Kind of where's it at in the process? Because I just know that, and you know the support of SDSU and SDSU football. I'm sure there's a bunch of people that are wanting to read that book. So can you kind of tease us out a little bit on where you're at in the process? Or
Yeah. I tell you, I'm about 50% done. And the first 50% has been the toughest because I've been researching kind of older things, right? From like I went all the way back to the first game and kind of been moving through the decades. And now I'm at the point where he gets the head coaching job in 97. And so it's just getting easier to get a hold of people and to gather information as I get into the more recent years. So I tell you, I'm probably about halfway done, but I think this next half will be easier than the first half. But man, it's a mountain to climb. Oh my gosh, it is. It is so much work to make that little progress. And again, I love it, but it is tough. It is a difficult challenge, but I enjoy it. And so I'd say I'm about 50% done. My goal is to have it out and ready after next season. I'm hoping that they can have a three-peat. I think that'd be amazing. And then after that, that's when I'll release the book. And obviously Stig is, it is a biography of John Stiglmeyer. But when we talked about the idea of the book, I told him, I said, I want it to be obviously to tell your story, but I want it to be about the program. And he really liked that. I mean, I'm sure you've met Stig and he's a humble guy and it's the real deal. And it's not about him. I mean, that's really how he is. And so he appreciated that I wanted to make it about everyone. And so I know the book is he's the main character, but it's the football program's story. And so that I think could be pretty good timing. If they can pull it off and have a three-peat, have the book come out after, that would be awesome. So I'm working towards that every single day. As soon as we get off the Zoom, I might watch some of the Minnesota game, but I'll be back working on the book too. So I hope to have it out by next summer.
is there like a working title at all, or can you not tease us too much with it?
I'm not going to give that to you yet because I got to confirm it with Stig. I think I have it. It's something that has to do with him. So I won't give that away yet because I don't know for a fact if that's what's going to be. But yeah, it came to me about a month or two ago and we talked about it and I think we've got it down, but not 100% yet.
Yeah, Stig's a great guy. I have an older brother, and Stig's son and my brother are in the same grade. So
Okay.
my dad always liked to joke in like youth baseball, like 12 and under. Like when my dad was the head coach of the 12 and under team, Stig would help out when he could
Oh,
around
really?
his schedule. So my dad always liked to joke that Stig used to be an assistant coach for him.
That's great.
So So kind of a funny story there, but
I'll
yeah,
ask him about that. I'll ask
I've
him about
known
that.
I've known Stig for quite some time.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's really cool. So then after you're done with Stig's book, are you gonna transition into writing Jimmy Rogers' book? I was just
Not
kidding.
yet, not yet. We'll slow up on that. I will. He'll be a big part of the book, though. I'm gonna obviously not as detailed, but I'm gonna put a lot of his story in the book because he's a part of it. I mean, how can you can't tell a story with South Dakota State football without Jimmy Rogers? So he will definitely be a big part of it. I'm actually interviewing him in a week and a half, so it won't be his book. Not there yet. Maybe one day, but yeah, he'll be in the book for sure.
Could you kind of maybe talk about what's the so you mentioned all the process of researching and digging up, kind of going back to, him growing up before, when he was an assistant to now you're kind of at where he's the head coach. What is how do you balance the research part of it? How are you figuring out who else outside of Stig that you're talking to bring in kind of some stories?
Yeah.
How what are you sitting down with Stig once a week? Kind of talk about
Yeah.
that whole process behind the scenes.
So maybe to give you like a visual, it's kind of the way I look at it in my mind. Stig is like, let's call him like the tree. Like we talk every, if it's not every week, it's every other week. And I always make those in person. I come to Brookings, we sit down, we talk for over an hour. And so he's like the tree, and then the branches are the people he mentions. So then I ask him for those numbers, or then and then it honestly just goes from there. Once you talk to that person, then they talk about a story. You get that person's number and you reach out to them. I have talked to a lot of people so far, and it's really a joy because they're so excited to talk about it. These are not people that are, it's not like I'm kind of cold calling these people, but they want to share these things that they've experienced. So it is very fun in that respect. And I can't tell you how many people over the phone end up crying when I call them. It's really something. Once in a while, I'll meet up with a person. Someone I've met up with quite some time now. I think it's been 4 or 5 meetings. Is Mike Daly, who was the coach before Stig and who was a big mentor to Stig and a big part of the program as well. I don't know if people quite realize how important he's been to South Dakota State to kind of build the program up before Stig took over. So it all starts with Stig. We sit and talk about every week. I record the talks on my phone. And then from there, I figure out who to talk to. And like, for example, let's say I have 2 interviews with, an hour with Stig and then an hour with someone else. Then you have to go back and re-listen to all those and you have to mark everything out. So that right there is 5-6 hours just logging interviews from the time you start the interviews, go through them, log them. And then you have to, I kind of put them in order by date because when me and Stig talk, I'll ask him a question about something that happened in 91. And 10 minutes later, we're talking about something that happened in 2008. And so I have a whole document and I have it organized by time and by year. And so I just have so much information and I have to organize it well. But it really starts with him. He is the person who gives me, my order. And then from there, I figure out all these people to talk through, really through word of mouth, for lack of a better term. So it's kind of interesting who I end up talking to. It's not sometimes who I expect. Sometimes it is who I expect. Sometimes I hear stories and go, wow, that's awesome. Let me get a hold of this person. This is cool. I actually got to talk to the Jacksonville Jaguars general manager last week, Trent Baalke, because Trent Baalke coached at South Dakota State from 91 to 95. He was an assistant on Stig's defense when Stig was the defensive coordinator. So I've got to talk to the general manager of an NFL team, talk to some cool athletes. I've talked to some cool people. So it is really something who all is involved with Stig one way or the other. But it starts with him as far as figuring out who to talk to. And I kind of look at it as a 3-step process. I gather quotes and information, kind of mold it out how I want to write it, and then you smooth it out and you form it into a story. So it's quite the process, and it does take a lot of time. There's no way to speed it up, but again, I enjoy it and I do lose track of time while doing it.
Yeah, it's kind of fitting for the type of guy that Stig is, where it's like a book about him, but it's
Right.
it's also more about the program. And then when you call these people, the impact that he's had on them, it's like they're like, yeah, I just want to talk about him. He wants it to be
Yeah,
about the program. It's kind of like a perfect
yeah.
microcosm of him as a person
Wait, that's a
overall too.
great. That is a great quote from you right there. That's so true. That's really how it is. And I'll tell you this on that note, he's gotten better at it because we're building a good trust between each other. It's quite an interesting friendship. We just go and sit and talk. I mean, that's really how you become friends with someone, anyways. But it's so hard for him to talk about himself sometimes because that's just not in his nature. It's so hard for him to speak about things that he has done and accomplished because he doesn't do that. I mean, he gave me I actually got it right here with me, the Mad Manual. These are the thing that the team would get every single year, and it's make a difference. That's what it stands for. In the Mad Manual, one of his biggest things is humility, and it talks about not talking about yourself. A good man is a humble man. Let others talk about you. And well, this book is I sit down and make him talk about himself. So it's kind of funny for him, and he's getting better at it, and we're getting more comfortable with that. So it's cool. It's cool dynamics.
It's kind of funny because it's like the what I think about is like with Bill Walton passing away recently. It's like you see all the different stories and memories and all that, and you hear like kind of a similar thread of certain people that are that are very humble and have a lot of humility. It's that they take a ton of time serving other people. They make it about them. They don't make it about themselves. And so it's got to be kind of cool to see all those people that Stig has really impacted, where they're like, if he won't say it, I'll tell you all of it and I'll brag about him. And that's what's
Exactly.
kind of cool about the book too.
Yeah, it's been good for me to spend time with that guy because some of the lessons that he talks about and preaches and lives are things I go, wow, I should adopt that too. And at my age, to be around someone like him as often as I get to be, I feel very fortunate for the opportunity that I've gotten. It's making me a better person. And I think you hear that from, I don't think I know, I hear that from every person I talk to that's been around him. He's just the real deal. That guy is the real deal. The way that he has treated others, the way that he conducts himself, there's just, there's not many people that I've met that are that transparent and match up that their actions align with their words. And it is good for me to be around.
Awesome. Well, I'm a huge book nerd, so I can't wait
Thank
to
you.
get my hands on a copy of this, especially because it's about SDSU football, a great leader, a great coach.
Mm.
And I just want to thank you for coming on. I figured we'd switch it up, and I think you do a great job telling stories and covering SDSU, which I'm obviously very biased and passionate about. So really appreciate you hopping on tonight.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you taking time for me. It's been fun. It's nice to, as you said, be on the other side of things. So thank you.